Mute. Somebody say something.
Don't call me for IT support.
Man, there we go. We're somewhat
Please.
live. No, let me rephrase. We're live as it gets, guys. And I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to kind of fly by the seat of our pants with some of the stuff, especially with you, Jesse. We got a couple of small topics to go over, which will lead us into our inevitable down the rabbit hole that we go. Jesse, since you might not have seen it before, we tend to go off on tangents that take us 20 minutes at a time to explain. We get in the weeds with things. Just like anybody else, we get in the weeds with explanations of why something is this and why something is that.
Happens to geek about stuff.
Yeah, we kind of nerd out. So, for anyone new to this, even though we had to goof up and start the stream the wrong way and restart the stream because I'm the idiot, I guess. That's probably the better way to explain that. Somebody say something. What?
Don't call me for IT support.
Man, there we go. Oh, goodness, I forgot about that.
Please.
Live. My genius forgot I have to mute the stream. Or I was like, why am I'm hearing it in the background. Why am I? Yeah, that was me. That was
so you just heard yourself talking?
I just heard myself all of a sudden pop in and start talking like a genius. Once again, I am still trying to get better and better at this. Right? So, who are we? We're three guys with a dream of helping others better navigate the crazy world of workstations and other fun work technologies. This time we have a special guest with us. We'll start off and go ahead and do that. So, Jesse, if you want to give us just like a little bit about yourself, some of your background, kind of what you do, and then we'll jump into some of the news topics, and then we'll actually get into the actual conversation with you.
Yeah, so my name is Jesse. Currently, I'm the president of RCI Construction, and we focus on commissioning and servicing solar and energy storage products. We've done decommissioning and a bunch of other stuff, and I'll tell you, through 2020, we did whatever kept the doors open. So we try to consider ourselves to be a jack of all trades. Before that, I worked with Brad in nuclear. And I got a considerable background in safety. And before that, I worked as a coach in NASCAR for the pit crews that went over the wall, changed tires. And that's actually where I gained my love for data analysis. And I would say my formal education is actually in sports medicine. So when people are, how did you end up understanding anything about electronics and things like that? I'll tell you, electronics and the fundamentals of electricity I learned through STEM and ICE. So it's not a straight line I could draw for anyone to get where I was at, but I'm that kid that grew up watching Modern Marvels and Build It Bigger, and I just enjoy playing with things. And just because I'm a huge dork, always moving one foot in front of the other and accepting new opportunities, I've been able to enjoy a very diverse work experience. And so right now, my big passion is just building teams and having fun, getting them the resources they need to do the job and do it efficiently and have a good reputation for being professional.
Well, that's Jesse in a nutshell. I can say from my experiences, having worked with him in the past, he's not the same kind of person you would think of when it came to nuclear. He worked in the safety organization. Most people that work in the safety organization, nobody likes. Jesse was one of the few people everybody wanted to see around. He was kind of the safety guy that would come out to the field and you'd be like, "Oh yes, come here. You need to see this. This is messing up on us." Just kind of nice to have people like that. But to jump quickly through some topics, first of all, I'll go ahead and say it. I'm Brad Medlin. Go ahead and say your names, guys.
Chris Touchberry.
Donald Blackmon.
Yeah, we are. So this is episode 22, and it's gonna have a fun name because it's gonna have a fun set of discussions. So we're calling now. If you know Revelations from the Bible, we'll stay off that topic pretty heavily. But it was, it's a book that talks about the future a little bit, but it also feeds in a lot from what's currently happening. And so that's kind of why we're going with this today, because a lot's happened in August. A lot of announcements have been out there, but the conversations that we're going to kind of lead us down in the trail with Jesse today are really going to kind of open people's minds to opportunities. You know, they're going to be revelations to what things could be. I say that just because I know how the conversations with me and Jesse tend to always go, so that's just where we're going to go with it. So jumping into our first topic, we have, quite simply put, the next USB standard is going to confuse the crap out of everyone again. So USB-C cables that are 40 gigabits are now going to be able to go up to 80 gigabits. But guess what? They're calling it USB 4 2.0. And it will confuse the crap out of everyone again. So they're saying that it's the USB version 2.0 standard, but it's double the bandwidth of the existing USB 4 cables. But it's, like I said, just like when we went to USB 3.2 by 2 by 18 Gen 496, yeah, the USB standardization process is very convoluted. Matter of fact, I watched a great little take from somebody the other day on how they kind of missed the fact that we had all the different types of USB cables, because at least with those you knew what you were getting. Nowadays, if you buy a USB cable, you don't know what it is until you plug it in sometimes. And the only standard of metric is it has to meet the 5.0 gigabit per second transfer rate. But it could be that from that all the way up with this apparently to 80 gigabits a second, which, good Lord, that's fast. It's going to enable a lot of transfer speeds for stuff. Donald will know it as much as I can say it. Little USB drives like this, SSDs, those are going to be huge. It's basically just changing the bus that it goes over. If you read into it some more, there's a lot of it that's just that. But gosh almighty, if we could have a good way to identify these things on boxes and packaging, it'd help a lot of people out. The second topic, which we're going to go through not as quickly as we did that one, deals with Zen4. So everybody knows that AMD went out there, launched us a new product finally. Nerd Brad's loving this because it's, once again, competition stepping up. We know at some point in the next couple of months Intel's going to launch some more consumer-based CPUs. But one of the things that we found is, and Chris and I have discussed this just through our testing, which is going to lead us into another topic of testing later that we're going to talk about. But that point is, every time you get a gen over gen change, we're getting to the point where consumer-based chips, products that cost sub $1,000 and realistically sub $700 for the actual CPU, are to the point now where they are competing with and absolutely demolishing 2 to 3 year old extremely high-end processors. $700 processors now are beating $2,000 processors 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So if that doesn't tell you that change is a good thing and that innovation from one company leads another company to innovate, I don't know what does. It's especially beneficial in my field and the fields that I tend to work in the most, is we need high-end processing, but at the same time, you always want the best bang for the buck. About the only thing that I can say about this that it doesn't really cover in here, and I'm not really sure how well they're going to bring it up, is, while yes, it states the DDR spec, what it doesn't state with the DDR spec is whether they're going to offer it with up to 64 gig DIMMs, which should be coming out fairly soon, as Samsung and Micron and SK Hynix are all pushing the releases of those products. So that's part one. And for a weigh-in in this discussion, one of the things that we're bringing this to is that we're entering a new stage within the channel where it's not just going to be about a podcast. And Jesse joined us a little bit early, so he gets to hear our fun conversation about this. But some of the things that have been happening in the world around me recently have been revolving around doing some actual product testing for some folks. And my response back to them was, yeah, I'll do it for this team of people. I'll put my skill sets and my data sets into that to make it, but we want to be able to go out there and I'm used to testing products in the past for folks, and giving them a response. But I think it's time that we kind of step the channel up and start giving everyone a response, letting everyone know what's going to be out there. Some interesting discussions that have been had recently with some folks, and because I tend to once again stay and focus on the workstation side of things. One of the interesting conversations we've actually recently been having is the difference between basically a simple laptop that most people use. So consider like a Microsoft Surface or a Lenovo ThinkPad, or a precision laptop, that's the thin and light type of generation, the ultra portable generation of those things. And the conversation has kind of revolved around, well, one of the downsides that we have and we have to deal with right now is that apps are more mobile. Everybody is more mobile. Everything's more hybrid. You've got Teams, you've got Zoom, you've got all the different platforms of applications that you're running, and you're also running your standardized Outlook and Word and PowerPoint at the same time. And it used to be that your standard i5 was pretty easy to handle that, but it's getting to the point where, depending on the level of CPU you go with, you may be looking at a problem where you're starting to bottleneck there. We all already know, and Donald will contribute to this conversation, just how bad machines with 8 gigs of RAM are when it comes to running Windows. It's almost a no never mind these days. It's there's not enough there. There's physically not enough there. So
And that's why I believe that there's not even I don't believe for Windows 10 there's even a 32-bit option anymore.
no, there's not. And Windows 11
No.
definitely doesn't have one. Windows 7
Yeah.
was, or wait, was it 8?
Windows 7 was the last one I believe that had 64 and 32-bit available.
Which
Yeah.
Wait, no, I do actually no. I believe 8 did have some. 8 it got rid of it on 8.1,
that's
but
what
I
I was
believe
going to say.
8 could still use 32-bit, which was a shocker.
And for those out there that don't quite understand what we're saying, so, and I think the ARM series is 64 as well, but from Windows. I like to break it down a little further for most people. So a 32-bit operating system and a 64-bit operating system, you're basically, it's the number of integers behind the decimal place for 2. So it's 2 to the 32 power that gets you up to a maximum of 4 gigs of RAM. All right? So that means that 4 gigabytes of RAM, which obviously if you guys know anything about the way computers were built way, way, way back in the day, back when Jesse, you and I, and Chris to a degree were younger bucks, those days, yet people thought that 512 megs of RAM was just like a terabyte today. Like people used to get excited.
XP had a gig.
Oh God, yeah. And that's the craziness to me. Matter of fact, okay, we're diving down the trail a little bit already. So, Jesse, I have to ask, what was the first personal computer you ever had or owned? Do you like do you remember if it was like a Dell, if it was because obviously back in the day Dell was huge.
I can't ever. I remember the first computer I used was over at my cousin's house. When I used the first computers I used, we didn't own because they were, rather expensive and stuff like that for us. So I'm not gonna lie. I remember the old floppies that had the hole in them that were literally floppy disks, and I was using that over my cousin. So yeah, I can't recall what the first, and I'll just tell you guys, the reason you see me smiling sometimes is the history you guys know about the machines as they've evolved. That's never been me. I'm much more of an end user. Like, what do you get out of it? So I do enjoy the fact that you guys are that thorough in the history of the equipment and the machines. You guys were talking about the USB, and I'm like, hey. Well, I'm the guy's like, does it fit in the hole? And as long as it does and it works, we're good. But obviously, I do know, obviously the rate of file transfer and stuff definitely when you get one that's not the right one, and all of a sudden it's like taking 4 hours to transfer files. Like what's going on here? You get frustrated, but yeah, I'm not the guy that you're going to talk to and get the history on that kind of stuff. I do apologize.
Oh no, like I said, but that's the thing. You're the end user. You're the exact kind of person for this conversation that makes the most sense. So like when I mention those USB-C cables, for example, think about it this way. You go out and buy one because your new machine. So if you didn't know this already, one of USB-C's new standards is that it can deliver up to 250 watts of power. The power delivery standard upped. That happened by going from the old standard where it was a maximum, I think, of 100 watts, but most of them were 90. 100
Yep.
watts over the cable, for lack of a better word. And so there are people out there that would buy a USB-C cable to be able to charge like their laptop. Most laptops you could do that with. But now what you're dealing with is it's not just the laptop side of things. It's the, you've got heavy end workstations that are going to be charged and ran over a single Thunderbolt 4 USB-C cable. And that's huge. But if you go out and buy the wrong cable, you're going to be going into the field, plugging the sucker in and going, what in the ham sandwich? I can't actually do this. I can't actually charge my machine. It's dying while I'm using it. And it's all because the labeling's terrible, even now.
You could run an
matters.
A4000 externally.
Huh?
You could run, well, if you could wire it up, you could run an A4000 externally.
Yeah, you could. A couple other things on the AMD launch that kind of took me by surprise. I mean, for as much research as we've kind of been doing on this ourselves, Chris, and conversations that we've been having, one of the things that shocked me, so notoriously one of the downsides of AMD has always been that when you bought the computer with an AMD processor in it, you had to have some kind of graphics card. Guess what? Every Zen 4 processor comes with an iGPU now.
That's right. I forgot about that. That's a big deal.
And that is for those of you that kind of don't recognize that to a degree. Yes, they're not going to run high-end games, but once again, for the everyday user, using Jesse in this example, you could go out and buy a Ryzen processor and not have to have some kind of crazy mobile APU-ish thing that they need. If all you need it for is the display output to run a Word, PowerPoint, Teams, those kind of things. So that's huge for that. It makes their machine, it drops the price of ownership for their machine in the future a lot too. And that kind of, as we go and build on the rest of the conversation that we'll have tonight and go about those things, it kind of brings us to the next little section of the discussion, which is we've got all these different opportunities running, and all these different new processes coming out for us. So AI is a big thing. Inferencing, sorry, tongue twister for me. Just the overall general aptitude for machine learning. And that's going to kind of start us into the fun part of the conversation. So the discussion tonight is going to kind of revolve around some of the things that Jesse and I have talked about in the past. But one of the things is, and I kind of want to let you kind of start and run with this a little bit, Jesse. But some of the things that from the world of monitoring and support and understanding folks in the field, there's a whole technology class, and Chris, you and I have kind of skipped over this a little bit in the past, but there's a whole industry dedicated to like camera technology. So the thing, and I was telling Jesse about this when we got started, the thing I want to reference first is if you haven't been out there and looked at some of the Intel, it's their AI camera systems and their and whatnot. I can't remember the direct product line. I'll find it out here momentarily and tell you while Jesse's talking about it. But there's a whole product line for just recognizing and using machine learning to figure out what's bad habits, what's a repetitive pattern we see out there in the field that doesn't look good. but Jesse's kind of been down this path a little way larger bit than I have. I'll let you explain kind of why, Jesse, and
Okay.
then obviously, for the three of us as we go, as you guys, because I mean, obviously, Donald and Donald and Chris have never had this conversation with Jesse before. I have. I have all the questions in the world that I can ask. I want y'all to ask questions. I want you to find and fire out some. If people are out there listening and have a question, want to fire one back to us and see what Jesse's looked at and seen, because he's, like I said, you can call yourself, not into the history and the weeds of it, but you go into the weeds of it when it interests you. So, okay,
I do. I have to say, I think about like all the possibilities. So we've already talked, I was like the safety guy, right? And no one likes the safety guy. No one does. And so that was terrible for my ego. So, I mean, when I sit there and think about AI, I mean, my thought goes to the TV series Silicon Valley, hot dog, not a hot dog, hot dog, not a hot dog. So if you guys ever saw that episode, you're probably laughing. But the thing is as AI evolves, we're going to clearly have bugs in the system. So, I thought I ran across this program or this company at Distributech, and they were called Cobra Vision. And right now in substation construction, they're setting up these cameras and they use AI to do behavior-based safety observations. And I was like, man, that's awesome, because no one likes that guy that's coming up there and said, hey guys, put on your hard hat, put on your gloves. And those are usually the easiest thing for someone to find. And I know that upsets the workers in the field. The guys in the field hate the fact that this guy's just bird dogging them, and they just feel like they're picking on them because they're, in their mind, trivial things because they're focused on the work. Well, I instantly thought that was the coolest thing, because I think back to what GPS has done for people going on road trips. I mean, if you got like Farmer Joe driving down the road in his truck and his old lady says, hey, turn right here. He's like, you don't tell me what to do. But the same guy has a GPS telling him to turn right, and maybe he's not supposed to, and there's a lake right there. He'll turn right and drive right in the lake, and GPS steering around. Like, no one complains with the GPS. We've grown to trust and just blindly follow technology. And so I was like, that might be a way to sit there and monitor behavior and get that feedback to the folks that matter, that are obviously managing the productivity and quality of stuff. And hopefully they're not, I I guess the best way to look at it is, who's buttering their bread, who's paying them. If that person gets that data and just gets a rundown of some stuff, so they know what things to go in there and remind the guys to do, it might be taken a little bit better. Um, but yeah, no. So to me, I thought that was a cool technology. I think that as our world evolves to more of a remote, I mean, my company right now, I sit in an office in Mooresville, North Carolina, and I've got 20 guys all over the country. I've got people in California. I got people that end up working. I got two guys right now in Colorado, a ton of people in Texas and Florida. And I have to look at how do I, find the levers to pull to keep them, productive and meeting the standards I'm looking to have met to take care of my clients. So we've got telematics in our vehicles. We have reportings, vehicle inspections. I have automated things that if they're telling me there's, things gone wrong, that just it doesn't tell me what's wrong. It tells me where to go look. Obviously, I can't be everywhere at once. And I'm sure a lot of people with a lot of companies, they've got a lot of folks that are working remotely. I mean, right now we're on Teams, which, I mean, think about how cool it was to do Zoom and Teams meetings, and that's blown up here lately. But I can tell you, having the camera on is one of the most important things you can do, because I know how many calls, back in the day I used to be on. I'm pulling weeds, not really paying attention in the garden, and no one knows, right? So to me, one of the things I keep telling my guys, hey, turn on the camera. But, as we get a more decentralized workforce and everything else, I think AI is a great way, not necessarily have Big Brother looking over your shoulder, but just helping those who got to manage the crews have a little better visibility in what's going on. Not necessarily tell them what's wrong, because again, technology can fail and it's not always accurate, but I think it'll narrow where you got to go look to go manage the workforce. So I'm excited about where things can go. Now, as far as what cameras are best and everything else. I obviously the clearer the camera, but I mean, as far as knowing whether or not there are spotters sitting there, or if someone backs into, like for me, I do solar. Skid steers run into solar arrays during construction all the time, and then of course no one knows who did it. So you know, it's like, hey, what happened here? And to me, it's a great way to have kind of the, I get black bear word, big brother looking out there. So those who end up being held accountable for managing the workforce have a better levers to pull, I guess, to keep everything going in the direction they need to go.
Well, and you bring that up, and I wanted to mention, first of all, it's the RealSense cameras from Intel that I was thinking about. Second of all, there's a guy out there on TikTok that I follow, and you know, TikTok for me is one of those things where it's like an outlet to show some cool stuff off. But there's a guy that's goes by Well and Septic Life, and he always tells his guys, because he's got cameras in all his trucks. He does septic and well, like I said, his username says it all. The company that he runs, it's in North Carolina. It's in the mountains of North Carolina. I'm not going to go out and figure out where that is for folks. But what he does, though, is he has cameras in all of his vehicles. And he goes, some of the guys, they're like, why do we have to have cameras? What is this for? And he's had to explain to them, you know, over and over and over again, this is not to, like, be affected to you. This is not like a judge of your character, although, yes, it will capture your character as you go. It's also a way to, because they drive larger, like F550, E550 Econo van, like the huge vans and trucks, you know, and they have company names plastered all over the side of them. And if you see a company that's, you know, looks like something, and it's a big old, you know, septic pump truck, guess what? If somebody decides they want to sideswipe you, then claims that you ran into them first, I mean, it's like, okay, well, how do you prove this without, you know, trying to go through it and get stuff resolved? How do you get things fixed from somebody else if you can't do it that way? And that technology, just that visualization technology, it's kind of changed the way people have looked at things. I mean, and it's even like it's a way to remove folks from the field doing a menial task. You know, one of the things that we've talked about is, and while Donald sometimes gets to work with me a lot more than others, there's a method in the nuclear industry that will kind of blow people's minds. And what I mean when I say this is, we always joke about having more chiefs than Indians, but realistically, the reason they have so many people that are supervisors or coordinators or managers or doing these things is because they have to have all of these observations in the field to tell people not what they're doing wrong necessarily, but also what they're doing right. Positive reinforcement's just as important as negative reinforcement. So if that's the case, then you have to have some kind of a way to get a perspective on that. And so what I would say is using these camera technologies just to be able to eliminate those observations. Just those. I mean, that's all we're really talking about is just the observations that people make, and they can go back and see the flags that are picked up for good behaviors, but also for bad behaviors, or for, you know, unsatisfactory conditions where it sees pipes all strewn along the ground and that kind of stuff, creating tripping hazards and so on and so forth. But being able to eliminate some of those kind of things from a person physically having to go out 3-4 times a week when they need to be managing a process, if it, you know, then what that means is, okay, that if you don't have to have 3 or 4 times a week somebody going out there, guess what? You can start reducing the number at the top. And the more people that you reduce above and above and above, the more free people will feel to do things themselves. Like you said, everybody has a negative connotation on safety folks, but at the same time, they're only there to help, you know, keep you safe. And so if you've got a way to remove the observation connotation to where it's flagging not only good conditions but also bad conditions, it also it works out to say, okay, then now we don't have to have as many people actually physically out here. And because it's always watching, as opposed to only for a few minutes when they show up, you instill that attitude of constantly being safe versus only every so often.
And you eliminate some subjectivity. I mean, I got to tell you, I really geeked when I first started working with Verizon Connect and we put the telematic trackers in. One of the previous companies I worked for, we had terrible safety record. We had over 1,000 vehicles all over the road, and I swear every other day we had an incident. And one of the tasks that we were tasked with were deployments, going around for AMI meter stuff, some demand response installs. So we had a ton of technicians. Many times we're just coming to a region, like say we're putting a new electric AMI meter, and just know that it's like allowing the utility to read your meter remotely, turn service on and off remotely, so you can get rid of meter readers and you don't have to have the guy go out there and have that debate with non-payment shut off, et cetera. But also it gives the homeowner data on their usage and all that. So people want cool, tracking their stats if they're using their power during peak, whatever, they get that data. But we had all these accidents and we started using, like when I had gotten with the company I was with, they had it installed, but they weren't really sharing the info with the technicians. So once we started sharing the data, and the always on thing is the most important. You guys, have probably seen, I was thinking about like The Real World and all these other reality TV shows. And, right now, if someone were to walk around with me and a camera in my face 24/7, I would, probably look like Sheldon Cooper on Fun with Flags, very, very rigid. But, after a while, if it's always there, you start getting comfortable, you become your normal self. And I'm sure when you've seen the craft out in the field, it's um, oh, here comes the boss, everyone stop working. Well, that's not a good observation. Or, maybe you got someone coming out doing an observation, doesn't really know the work. So all they do are pick on the few things they do know. So it's not really hitting everything. Where I think if you've trained AI to look for a few key metrics, but it's consistent. Well, obviously anyone talks about behavior management. If you've got kids or you train dogs, consistency is key. And that's the part that I think is most important. And I think that's where you'll see the biggest benefits.
Yeah, I'd say so. So I just pulled up the page, so I kind of was interested when you mentioned that. So are y'all using the dash cam too?
No.
Because that's freaking awesome.
Well, but so when you talked about the vehicle accident, sometimes I wish I had that. I actually had a technician last, I want to say October, November. He's down in Texas and it was his day off. He's got this big old Dodge Ram 2500 Laramie edition, our logo on the side. It's pretty, all white, brand new, pretty much. He got it detailed. He went, got himself a steak for dinner, driving back to the hotel, and he's literally trying to get over to get off on the exit. And this Jeep comes around in front of him and slams on the brakes and he rear ends it. And they slam a brake right in front of him. And then they drove off about a quarter mile and he totaled his truck. Apparently that vehicle was totaled, but it was 2001 Jeep Cherokee or whatever. And I'm sitting there thinking, it almost felt like a setup when you listen to the story. And we had that telematic tracker, and seeing the damage that was to his truck and what was to their, to their vehicle, the tracker at least showed that at the point of him slamming on the brakes, he was going 55 miles an hour. So if the point that he slams on the brake and had the hard braking was at 55 miles an hour, you guys have driven 55 miles an hour and you slammed on the brakes. I wouldn't envision the amount of damage actually happening if the car in front of them didn't just slam on the brakes really close, because you know what I mean? And so I thought we had, enough data to prove that there was no incident or that it was a setup, but ultimately our insurance company decided just pay it. So if you guys ever had a company and you had to deal with insurance costs after a big incident like that, where you've got reported injuries and two total vehicles, yeah, that'll raise your premiums quite a bit. So yeah, I definitely wish that I had the video to that, and that's I believe why. If we used to have a dump truck, and the we thought, oh well, just on the bigger vehicles we'll have that because I'm sure everyone's seen those videos on YouTube where you got the truckers and people pull out in front of them, and it's like, yeah, the bigger the vehicle, the longer it takes for them to stop. So I definitely think it's a great way to work both ways. I mean, if you're doing something wrong, it's going to catch you, but 90% of the time when you're on the job, you're more than 90% of the time, you're probably doing things the right way. You're a little bit more focused. I mean, what scares me, the soccer mom sitting there yelling at the kid and, doing all this other stuff and texting her phone, put on the makeup. That scares me more than anything. And, when you sit there, you got most of my guys. I mean, yeah, usually the only time they're taking their eye off the road is when they're throwing up a monster and then continue down the road. But it happens. So yeah, having that technology to view what's going out in front and in the back helps. So
Hey, I'm just like I said, I've kind of got it up for those that are watching to see this kind of thing. This is kind of it's a unique experience at the very least. Um, I don't know how well it works. I mean, just seeing some of the AI functions and features of it alone make it kind of interesting to me. Uh,
well, yeah, when you're trying to modify behavior of your workers,
yeah,
I mean, you don't have to. I mean, you thought about the cost of other people sitting there. I mean, think about all these companies who are delivering Amazon packages and stuff like that. I mean, it's a thankless job. Usually it's an early entry level job. So, you've got a younger workforce, and how do you do that? How do you manage them remotely without having a ton of people? And AI is, I think, the only way that you can do that. So, like I said, as the workforce becomes more and more decentralized, I don't know any way you're going to be able to put the reins on the horse to control it, especially if you're trying to set a standard and improve performance compared to your peers. I think the people that do early adoption obviously might pay the biggest cost. You're talking about the cost of, you know, if you bought like a super high, speed processor, before, now you got really cheap ones. The biggest cost sometimes is on the early adopters. However, I think you got to look at what's your reputation in the industry. Because if you were an earlier adopter, you probably know how to take advantage of that a little bit better than those who didn't. So that's sometimes, your trade-off. Sometimes wait and see because, maybe you can, ride the coattails of someone who's there before you. But, it's that's the game that a lot of people play when they're looking at, investing in technology.
yeah, that's a true statement. Okay, so just a fun little tangent for Donald here for a second. So one of the things that we've been working on ourselves is trying to find a method to the madness for us to kind of go out and put a test suite together ourselves. I know you guys use drones, Jesse, and y'all use Pix4D and that kind of stuff for that, which is industry standard to most. You have to watch out. There's a cat in the frame. Every now and then you'll get a cat in the frame.
That's cool.
But the conversational point and where I was going to go, Donald, was this. So, like I said, as someone who travels a bunch, Donald, where's your kind of thought process of if somebody had a fleet dash cam that was sitting in front of you in one of the vehicles and you're riding around? I mean, I feel like it's a difference. I mean, I don't know how much I'd enjoy it, but at the same time, if it's protecting property from and all that other stuff, it's probably not a bad thing.
From a liability standpoint, I totally agree. I totally understand it. I agree with it. I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't just went out and bought my own dash cam for myself. I'm just too lazy to do it, and it's gonna bite me one day probably. But no, is it also really depends from the worker's perspective how tight the rein is. For instance, in regards to like telematics, I've driven in vehicles that have had telematics before, and if it's like 3-4 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's what the rate traffic's doing. No one really cares. But I mean, it's really once you start getting into like those higher numbers that it really matters. Like the 7, 8, 9, 10 miles an hour over the limit. So if it just depends on how tight the management is on how fast you're going. You could be going down a hill and you don't want to wait, you don't want to use your brakes and you gain a couple miles going down the hill. If you get reprimanded for that, that just makes you hate the technology more so than realizing that it's there to protect you in a situation where you could be considered liable.
I'll go one further for you for some of the stuff that I've seen from the guys that have had it implemented around within certain fleets that we're associated with. They yanked it out faster than they put it in because they implemented it wrong. That's the other thing. With a lot of this, and I would say this because of who you are, Jesse, a lot of it depends on who at the top is making this decision and how much do they respect and trust their employees. And the reason I say that is there's some out there where, like I said, the fleet that we're a part of, they yanked them out faster than they put them in a lot of vehicles because they had managers that were getting emails about guys going 5 miles over 60 in a 65 mile per hour zone because it was set on a standardized speed, and they figured, oh well, we can just tell them they can't go faster than 60. Guys, within the operational territories that you're working as a company, if you say 60 mile an hour, it's like the I use this as a comical point because we talked about truckers earlier, like the Swift truck drivers that have their vehicles governed at 65. Mm-hmm. Well, in the area we live in, we operate around in North South Carolina, there's plenty of actual interstates that are 70 plus. 70 mile an hour speed limits and so on and so forth. If you're speed governing somebody with telematics, for example, not necessarily actually governing the vehicle, but telematically controlling it and then giving a report. If you're doing that and saying, okay, at 65 miles an hour, you're going to get a report sent to your manager to tell you, and then they're like getting that report going, I've got to tell this guy to slow down now via text or via call while he's driving. And you're limited in capabilities, but also if you're telling people they can only go a certain speed. Now, I think with GPS and telematics, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but if you haven't used Google Maps or Waze recently, that thing pops the speed limit up on you wherever you're at. Like, it knows what the speed limits are in most places. And if it doesn't know the speed limit, you ought to be able to default it down to the last one available. 55, 45, so on and so forth. But I think that's the other thing. As the technology gets smarter, for instance, and also when you're working with large companies, you tend to have the problem that you have with that when I say as the technology gets smarter is people buy into something, and then when they implement it, the program is 3 years behind the cutting edge. And so when you're 3 years behind that cutting edge, you're working off technology that's still saying, yeah, he's doing 65, yell at him. As opposed to, hey, he's doing 65 in a 65 zone, guys. We don't need to say a word to him. Or he's doing, 60 in a 55 zone. We don't need to yell at that kind of thing, You got to look at the actual cause and reality. Now, I guess technically if it's reporting out, could the back-end software help you somewhere there too, maybe? I don't know. But
that's the key. He said, hey, who's reviewing the data, right? What are your constraints? I know for a fact, I want you guys to think about this. You can get alert for hard stops. Mm-hmm. But taking evasive maneuver because someone does something stupid in front of you might require you have a hard stop, right? So there's no reason to coach a one-off event. I'll just tell you guys, my alerts start coming at 15 over posted speed limit. But I don't call people while they're getting those alerts. I look at it and I look at their driving score, which is usually an algorithm based off of a series of events. Because you can coach behavior, you can't coach a one-off mistake, right? So, but one thing I think most people struggle with when you're analyzing data, especially when it comes to behavior-based stuff. I go back to when I was a coach in racing. I remember there was a team that I had, a front tire changer, that in practice, I mean, the whole team was in sync. We were easily getting 11-second pit stops, changing 4 tires and gas. But then we go to the racetrack, and the team always fell apart, and travel to the right front was really slow. And if I didn't, obviously the numbers told me where to go look. So I started staring at the video. If I had just said, look, this tire changer sucks, I got to get rid of him because he can't do it at the track, I would have lost a great tire changer. What ended up happening is in practice, we didn't have guys behind the wall holding tires. At the racetrack, to make sure we had tire control and everything else where it's more congested, you got other teams on either end of you, we had the road guy sitting there holding the tire, and at the track he kept setting it on the hose of that front tire changer. So we went out to go get the right front. Instead of getting down like you normally would in practice, he would take that little bit of pause to get a little slack in the whip of his hose before he go down. But that little bit of time that he would take to do that threw the whole cadence out with the rest of the team, and it just messed him up. He wasn't hitting those lug nuts in the pattern with the car coming up that he's used to when he'd practice, and it threw everything out. Once you're out of sync, you're out of sync. As soon as I fixed the guy behind the wall, my tire changer was fine. So, I mean, I think the biggest problem, like, you're saying, is one, you got to make sure that your data is not so precise that you're pissing people off because it's hitting a one-off event where maybe they did it for the right reason. Or, I mean, I think of speeding. There was in Texas, they're notorious for having these access roads next to the highway that might be 45 miles an hour, but it's 70 when you're on the highway, and it's GPS, so it makes a mistake. So we'll say you're on the access road and speeding when you're doing just fine. Or it used to be a construction zone for the last, I mean, you guys in South Carolina, I'm sure, going up and down 85, I think it's been construction for the last 6 years. So eventually one day your speed limit's going to go up and they forget to update it in Google Maps, or you're going to be pinging and you're not actually doing something wrong. So again, you got to have a little bit of, AI is great because they'll tell you where to go look, but if you just rely on it solely, I mean, it's just as bad as not having it at all.
That's one of the things I was going to mention, how you can't, or like, to give an example, there was when I was driving in a telematics vehicle, there was a road that I was driving down where, all right, road sign says 45 miles an hour. Google Maps said it was 25. And I didn't know which one the telematic vehicle, or like which one the telematics was going to look at. I don't know which one was the more recently updated one, probably the road posted sign, but I didn't want to get dinged going 20 over. So I slowed down to 25 based on what Google Maps did, and I probably pissed off a lot of people behind me. But, I would rather in that situation be safer than sorry, because it's really hard to explain to your manager, hey, yeah, sorry, I went 20 over, in a 45. That could be like, oh, yeah, I'm going 20 over in a school zone. It doesn't know that. Manager doesn't know that unless they know the area very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also gonna say it's more like 60. It's been going on for 60 years in South Carolina. Yeah, we definitely have it. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Have it made.
Um, and that's the thing to me. Like it's industry wide. You see so many different people doing things so differently. So to me, it's kind of cool. You get the opportunity to hear from the folks that are saying, well, I mean, this is something that we like to use. This is something that how we do this. This is how we do that. And they really do kind of show you opportunities for improvement, for lack of a better word. Opportunities to see and do different things. You know, and I think that technology is making us more portable. You mentioned we're in a disaggregated. We're branching out and becoming further and further from where we used to be, where we were basically sitting at the house, not doing. Now we're sitting at the house doing stuff, whereas before we were, having to go to an office every day, so on and so forth. So there's a lot more freedom to stuff. But like you said, there's also that well, how are we going to go about doing this, that, or the other thing? I think the difference for me is it's also made the way we handle stuff. So one of the things that when I was talking to you about doing this, and we'll shift gears a little bit, but we were talking about was like ways to cut costs, but also give a better product. And so
Yeah.
the example that we're going to go down this path with right now is the Panasonic Toughbook. If you go to industry and you look at what most people put in their bucket trucks, in their company vehicles that are always on the road, out in the field, these line technicians,
Police cruisers.
yeah, police cruisers, all those, yeah, it is a dad blasted Panasonic Toughbook because guess what? You spill your coffee on it, you do X, Y, or Z on it, it's good to go. That's the way they market them. You know, they market them as the machine for the mobile workforce. That's a mobile workforce working in the field, right? You have a different approach, and I kind of want you to share that because I think that that's a for especially for the people that listen to us and talk and respond with us. That's kind of something to me. Once again, we always talk about bang for the buck. You've kind of cornered a way to do that. So
Yeah, I'd say when we started, I mean, my company, we're focused on substation construction and maintenance. I was thinking we're going to have, the map shack and the printed drawings and just, old school stuff. And we've evolved once we started getting to solar, working with some of our clients. My guys now are doing firmware updates and setting parameters and all this crazy stuff. And then every one of our clients now, most companies are using like FieldWire or Procore, and you got to do notes and photos and all this stuff to document. And you've got a field workforce that has to put all this stuff in. Cool, some of that stuff's on the phone, but the other thing is for a lot of the sites we're going in, you got NERC requirements that you got to do software updates and everything when you're pushing firmware. And I'm trying to minimize how many devices. So I was kind of laughing. Brad was talking about, yeah, you get a lot of these guys that are going out in the field. They got these tough bucks that no one ever takes out of the truck because they do everything on an iPad or another tablet. And that was one of the things as a small startup construction firm. And we're like, hey, I don't have a lot of capital to do this. I don't have a couple $1 million investors, seed money where I can go out and get whatever. And so we did. We got these cheap Lenovo laptops, $600 because, we needed a ton of them really quick. And their, longevity was about 8 months. Once you start getting these things dropped, it looks like bolt holes in the screen. You're like, oh man, this is bad. But a lot of our competitors are running around these Panasonic Toughbooks, and we started looking at getting refurbs. And finally, we started looking at just doing a ruggedized case on a Surface. And it's been, I mean, we use little Surface Goes. We give our guys a 14.1 dongle. And when they're in the hotel room and want to really look at stuff on a bigger screen, you got HDMI to the TV in the hotel room. Now you've got double screen. But it's also something small that they can go out in the field. It's ruggedized. You got a Gorilla Glass screen. So and like I said, the casing is what makes it, what you need. So for us, it's been kind of interesting. Instead of spending about $1,800 on a Toughbook, we're spending $700 on a Surface Go, and it does everything we need to do. Most of our applications are web-based anyway. So it's not like I need to have a ton of processing for a majority of the work that we do. So it's a nice way for us to get guys out in the field, get them something nice. And I don't know, for all the applications, like you said, it runs all the Windows suite. And, if 365, I'm definitely a big fan of it. And I don't want to trash the service that we used before, but it was an Office. And I just love how it's a little bit more integrated, especially more with our clients. And, that's, I think, the hard thing right now is I want to stay agnostic. I mean, I don't know. It's really frustrating to me. Everyone's like, well, do you work on this? It's like, man, I'll work on anything. So, telling people that, but then everyone has their own, okay, well, even when it comes to invoicing, everyone has their own different invoicing process, but, data, a lot of these companies are doing their own internal investments in how they get data into their construction managers or project managers. And as a third party provider, we've got to adapt to it all. So I think that's been the hardest thing for us is, well, it comes down to the spec. And you guys were talking about that, USB-C. We do have to make sure that we are validating spec before we do anything because, that's bitten us before. So you can spend a lot of money on something and then it was a complete waste because it didn't really meet the spec. So if there's one thing I can tell anyone, the most important thing to do before you buy anything is research requirements before you spend $1.
I feel like that's something that a lot of people overlook. There's a lot of opportunities there, I would say. I keep telling myself that, and we're the unique case ourselves. We have it feels like we have 9,000 computers, right, Donald?
Yeah, I've got 3 sitting around me right now.
I mean, granted, some of them are desktops that, and everything's got a specialized purpose, but at the same time, boy, it'd be nice if somebody could just make a general purpose machine that was portable and up to all the spec. But the problem that you run into is power requirements to do all that, unfortunately. Although I am playing around with some stuff. I actually have I'm not going to pick it up because it's on, but I have a Lenovo P360 Ultra. I'll show you what it looks like on the screen. You might not see it though, guys, but I'm doing a little demo and testing and playing around with it and trying to find some stuff out. I like these little things. These things are just fun. But I'm looking at it because once again, I mean, if there's a way to get more power into a smaller package, and what I'll do for y'all is I'll actually put this on the in the Teams chat for you so you can actually see it. But where is this? And then this. It's basically a mid-level workstation. I mean, it's not like going to be super top end, but it's got a lot of oomph, as I like to say. It's got a lot more oomph in behind it than some of the others. Put this in the chat so you guys can look it up here for y'all in the Teams chat, that is, because the rest of the world doesn't get to see this. So there it is there. But for those looking on screen with us, but I mean, basically it's up to now keep in mind it's got a limit to the power supply that it has because it's an ultra small form factor. Guys, this thing is about as long as a tall boy Red Bull and about 4 thick. Four in a line thick, Saul. So
It's almost about the size. It's a little bit larger than a GameCube. That gets you a good point of reference. It's smaller than it's smaller than a football, around the size of a football if it was a square.
Yeah. If a football was square, it's about that. But it can pack up to an i9 12900K, all kinds of. It's got a lot of power, but in its configurations, it's also got GPU options that you can't get with some of the other small form factors. The things so
Consumer.
Yeah, with all the other it's the big thing to me was this, and the reason I'm bringing this up with you is and talking about it even now is it's got the ability to outperform what is a much larger tower on a 300 watt power supply too. So I mean, it's something where if you got a big truck and you threw a little 18-inch TV in there with it, 18-inch monitor in there with it, like mobile monitor or something like that, and you just had this thing slide into a rack in the truck, you'd have 10 times the graphics power. And guess what? Most of your heavy work vehicles that you buy with the little internal power outlet, most of those are 350 to 400 watt power outlets. So you could run a full-size desktop and do all the things that you would not imagine you could really do, for lack of a better word.
How are they doing 8 outs?
So
are there 4 outs on the processor itself?
Yep. Yep, you can pull. You can because it's got Thunderbolt too. Thunderbolt connects.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's got 2 Thunderbolt ports, 5 USB A's. It's a great little thing. I mean, after I got mine and started working with it, I was like, about the only thing I can complain about it is it's a desktop. You don't need multiple Thunderbolt ports. Just give me one because you can daisy chain them. So I was like, I'd love more of the full size USB because it has one on the front. And think about this. This is something that as the end user would think. Do you have a thumb drive that uses USB-C, Jesse?
I bought one and returned it.
Right? Most all of them use the old school fat USB-A.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard. Well, actually, I got one because, well, I don't need to get in the story because it's gonna, I think, sit amongst you guys. I got my Surface. I was trying to update from the home version of Windows to professional, and I learned the hard way that you got to log in a non-work account to do that first. Otherwise, you're going to lock it up in S mode. And I got to tell you, it was 2 days of hell. But I had onboarded 2 guys. I just went to Best Buy to get a Surface so that I could get my guys rolling on the field. And I bought the upgrade package, but I logged in on my work one, which I was told that had to have been it. But long story short, I got it fixed. I felt like a hero though when I was done. You know, that's the best part of troubleshooting something. When you're done, you're like, I did it. I'm so smart.
Yeah.
But then you look back, you're like, holy cow, I just lost an entire 16 hours. I can't believe it took that long to figure this out. But no, I forgot where I was going with that. Sorry, guys.
You bought a USB-C thumb drive to return it.
Oh yeah, I had one of my guys get one of those so I could save the image of or load it with the image to reboot my computer. I was going to create a safe.
Yeah.
Or whatchamacallit for it.
That's it's not an ISO, it's an installer file, installer package file.
Yeah.
It's one of, where's mine? I have one laying around here because I have to do it so often. Yeah, here's mine. Mine's a USB-A though. Always, if there's 3 things you should always have as an IT person, 3 things, which we're not IT people, but I'm just saying. But if there's 3 things I always keep in my backpack, it's
not your typical IP people.
That's right. It's a Windows installer. That's right. A Windows installer, a plethora of the Intel and AMD CPU drivers on a USB stick, and then a plethora of the softwares on that same stick. Basically, it's like it's basically your basic image. You know, if you got software that you and your team use on a regular basis, put an install, even if it's an old one, because you can still, once you install it, you can still typically connect and update it pretty quickly. But keep a copy of the software that you use, keep an actual Windows image drive, and then keep a couple of those drivers. The reason I say that comes in handy is, as I have found out through various other scrupulatory issues we've had to deal with in the past, having those drivers on hand with you will save you in the back end, because sometimes you have to have them to be able to install on a rated set of drives. So yeah, you got to have those kind of thought processes in the back. But the other thing, so I pulled that up to kind of show you that was one of the things, you know, some of the testing and stuff that we're kind of getting ready to look at and do and compare. We're actually getting ready to put a test suite together to run against so Donald's machine actually has the K version of the CPU in this one, which is a 12900K or 12700K. I have the 12700 in this little Lenovo, and then of course Chris has the ultimate rig back there with that 12900K at the home office up in Raleigh. That we're going to do some testing with it on to, like, basically kind of come back and say, one of the things that I always tell people, when you're looking for the best price to performance on certain things and you're looking in certain applications, everybody tends to go and quote benchmarks that they see online. Well, it's like you're saying. So, like, yeah, you go out and buy these tough books that have all this processing horsepower in a massive package that absolutely is ungodly expensive and runs through 9,000 tests, only to know if you have people that are, aware of what they're working with and care about their job, they're not going to throw around a laptop. They're not taking it and spilling coffee on a laptop. I tell you, they market it because they market those tough books to cops all the time, like you said. And if you ever see a cop car and you walk up and walk by that front seat, you'll see it either shut or open. I don't know how many cops have cup holders that can spill into that dang tough book. Like, and you're inside with that thing? What are we doing here, guys? I mean, how are you physically needing something other than just a basic laptop to do your job? All you're doing is connecting to the internet and inputting a spreadsheet and inputting data into a database. You're not even managing the database. That's all managed on the back end server. Like, none of us are doing that. And to the point that you were making earlier with some of the guys that we've worked with, or I've worked with in the past, I should say, having two devices to do your job kind of sucks. It's kind of like those guys you see that have to carry around two cell phones, one for work and one for home. Like, I will occasionally do it. I'm not gonna lie, but it's not because. But that is not because I have to. That's because I like to have one that I just set up and use as a GPS screen, or one that I've got to use to control a scanner in the field or something like that. And it's usually an old phone. It's not like it's a brand new thing that I'm just holding two new phones side by side. Whereas those guys that carry those around that have to have two, the two belt clips that show you're a super dad. You got to have the two belt clips to be a super dad. Yeah, I don't understand that. I mean, two devices for basically, a lack of a better word, to do the same exact task. I mean, once again, what that tells me is what they're doing on the iPad. If they're just unwilling to do it on the laptop, and what they're doing on the laptop, they're unwilling to do on the iPad. So like, it's basically, I'm going to use the iPad because I want to type stuff. I'm going to use the laptop because I want to, or I'm going to use the laptop to type stuff, and I'm going to use the iPad for the pen and circle slash in a document. I mean, once again, if you can integrate it between two, why not?
Well, that's one of the things we run into right now is a lot of my guys are really comfortable doing everything on their phone because almost everything will have like a phone app version that, gets them 90% what they need. But, if they were on the tablet or a PC using the same application, you got about 10% more functions. But because they're not using it there, they just don't know the full capability of a program. And I think that's one of those things you want to look at is like, hey, can your team actually take full advantage of everything you're giving them? Because it's like, you don't get to pay only 90% for the license, right? So it's not like you get a discount because they only use it on the app, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, the thing that frustrates me too is I'll have a guy that I'll give a Surface to, and it'll sit inside the console and just sits there for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. And then he gets to a site, and it's a NERC site, and he's got to update it. And he's spending all day updating it, using his phone as a hotspot because there's no Wi-Fi. Because I'll just let you guys know that what I think they do to decide where to build a solar site is they're going to say, oh, there's no cell signal, let's do it here. And then the construction team is out there. You've got no cell service. You don't have, fiber like that. And if you don't go to the site prepared, you're going to be screwed. So it's just one of those things where, for me, as an owner of a company, you're sitting, you're looking at it, and you can't not see the meter running. And so to me, you think about the error traps that people are going to get into. If I could give them one piece of technology that they will keep that out all the time, so they get comfortable with it and they use it, it's going to probably stay updated, and you eliminate those error traps where, well, for the last 3 weeks, I only needed my phone, so I never got to this. Well, now I just wasted 2 hours or more of wrench time because this guy didn't update his computer. And I don't know if you guys know, if you're going to push parameters and firmware stuff and you go to a NERC site, you're going to have to go through, because of the cybersecurity and critical infrastructure stuff. You got to make sure that your software is updated and you've done a virus scan. and you got to do all that before you can go in there and do work. So if you're that guy, you show up, and there are times where my guys, the nearest hotel might be 45, 50 minutes away. So even if they were to say, all right, I'll go back to the hotel, it's like, oh my God, we just wasted so much time. And then you feel like a terrible boss because you're yelling at a guy, but you're like, hey man, I just paid you for 5 hours and you didn't do anything. So you kind of sit there, and having the ability to put it on one device eliminates so many error traps. It helps, and also someone gets comfortable with that platform they're used to. Because Brad, I think you're one saying it's like, most people buy for themselves what they use at work or school, right? So I think that's why a lot of software companies try to infiltrate the schools and say, hey, use this. And then once people get used to it, that's where they stick to it. I mean, now you're either an iPhone guy or an Android guy. And iPhone all the way right here.
Oh, trust me, Chris is the only one in this group that's an Android person. One day
That's where the functionality isn't there. I'll just like, oh, you just do this. It's so easy. And then my guys have the Androids. They're like, oh, a couple extra steps.
Yeah. I mean, and that, but that's the point. Like, it's what, like, I actually was talking to somebody the other day, and they were talking about Chromebooks and whatnot, and it's funny to think about the fact that they're putting like Core i5 processors, which, if you know what they are, into Chromebooks now. Chromebooks, which this is for schooling. Like, people, like parents were telling me this about their kids. Like, you have the option to buy one for your kid or whatnot, or the school provides this rinky-dink one. Like because a Chromebook's basically designed to be like a $399, $299, $199 computer. $199 to basically $200 to $400 computer. But it runs off the Google suite of apps. It runs off of and don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to the Google suite of apps, but I can't use them for work personally.
Yeah.
I use them for everything else, photos, Drive, all that stuff. But personally, they're great. But the integration that you have with that kind of mindset, and then they go, yeah, and then somebody's like, oh yeah, I just bought this $800 Chromebook that's got a Core i5 and 16 gigs of memory, and I'm like, it's a Chromebook. Like, it's actually not 64-bit. It's not an operating system. It's running off the network. Like,
should never spend $800 on a Chromebook.
Right? That's the way I'm looking at it. Like, but there are people out there because they, these people have been convinced, like we just said, that they're at work, and every day they're at work, they're working on a Dell Latitude laptop, and it's fast enough for them. Of course, Donald, to your point about restarting earlier, and you needed to, okay, Donald was having some issues before we got started, and it's like, I think I need to reboot real quick. He was gone for maybe 20 seconds total before, and that's from rebooting, getting the machine back up and running, getting into Windows, into Teams, back into the meeting. 20 seconds, maybe 25. Like, I don't know about y'all, but that's pretty quick, I'd say. I mean, is that not a fair estimate of the time, Donald? 20, 30 seconds?
Yeah, I messed up typing my pen, so it took another couple seconds.
But I mean, realistically though, like, I think some of us get so used to the old and slow method, as I like to call it, of those Dell Latitudes that have 8 gigs of RAM. And oh, by the way, they still sell them. Yeah. Let's for those that are watching, if you would like to get a Dell Latitude that has 8 gigs of RAM, and a Core the cheapest Core i5 you can find, it's $1,500 with the 256 gig SSD. I mean, that's also the smaller battery. Well, you have to get the bigger battery if you get the other specs. Never mind. I'm not going to mess with that. But the point of it's this. So you got a major difference here. You've got a Core i5 processor that you're paying $1,500 for something that is, you're going, okay, that's not bad. That's manageable. That's X, that's Y, that's Z, that's the price of it. You know, and most people are fine with that. Of course, this is the 15-inch model. I should have looked at the 13-inch model. There we go. That might be.
How dare you?
But regardless, you've got. Wow. I just went from the 15-inch model to the 13-inch model, and the price went up.
Yeah,
must say,
I'm watching the stream and I'm seeing that. That's incredible.
Now
I must say this makes me exceedingly happy with what I paid for my Tiger Lake laptop.
I mean, they're i5s once again, and that's the point of it. You don't need a whole lot of processing power to do what you do on a daily basis.
Now there's
I don't know about you, Jesse, but like most standard users out there are doing it with, you know, for lack of a better word, they're doing all of their work with a cheapo laptop that probably costs $1,000 or less, and doesn't need more than that. I mean, if you don't, if you do, you're probably lying to yourself. I mean, I could survive. I tell people this all the time because I've actually proven it to myself recently. Much as I hate certain features and apps and things like that, if I had to, I could get rid of every computer I ever had and run my day-to-day life, not my work, my day-to-day life, on an iPad Pro with the little keyboard adapter. I could do everything on that. I could probably do the same thing on a thin and light laptop that didn't have where I didn't have to have Teams up constantly and stuff like that. But even the iPad Pro has 8 gigs of RAM. I mean, you're talking about a laptop that runs Windows. We all know Windows is way more bloated than the basically iOS version for an iPad. So if that's the case, then I'm still blown away at the fact that you can get away with a laptop with 8 gigs of RAM and in single channel memory nonetheless.
I'm looking at Dell's website right now. Did you even look at the Inspiron 15?
Oh no, I'm looking at the Latitude because that's usually what most companies go after.
Yeah.
The Latitude product line is actually the Latitude product line. That's what we actually use, Donald. We actually have the 7 series Latitude product, so it's actually more expensive.
I've got a 13-inch Acer with a i7, 16 gigs of RAM, 500 gig NVMe, and an iGPU. I paid about $800 for it, with a ridiculously long battery.
And I mean, realistically,
it's a little small.
Oh yeah,
but,
and realistically, you have to look at the positives and negatives of everything. Like to me, it's what are you getting for the money? I mean, that I always think that to the point that we would make with when we've had with you so far, Jesse. What are you getting for the money? Yeah. So going with the Surface option over these things, it's just funny to me to see this and see how bad, and yet, you know, this is what cracked me up. I've had some fun conversations with some Dell reps recently, and for various reasons. I don't want to. I won't air dirty laundry or any of the fun conversations I've gotten to have with them. Which they've been the reps that I have been extremely helpful in resolving some issues we've had. However, the comedy that we got into a conversation with the rep about, which was just, like I said, just absolutely hilarious to me, was, all right, just look at the way you want to do something. So look at this right here, right? The Latitude that I have on screen right now is a 7330. It's a laptop or a 2-in-1, however you want to look at it. It is a Core i5. It's the newest generation Core i5, but it's running on DDR4 memory. Why, in your in the right mind of anyone on the street, would you be buying something with last generation memory? You know, it's like if you're gonna go out and spend your money and buy a bunch of things, why would you buy stuff that's a generation old? when you're expecting a product to last you 3 to 5 years. People do that, Jesse. You know, people will go out and say, "All right, I'm gonna buy this. What do they call them? I'm gonna do this one. I'm gonna buy this floppy disk." And I'll go back to the big screen for those that are watching. I'm gonna go buy this floppy disk to use to put the files I need to transfer on here. Why? First and foremost, yes, I do have a floppy disk drive. It is a Lenovo USB to floppy. And yes, it still works. And it cracks me up every bit. That's another thing. I mean, okay. All right, Jesse.
That's very secure.
That's
the cybersecurity, right? Right there, that's cybersecurity.
Nobody's hacking
It's like
this.
Grand Theft Auto protection is driving a manual, right?
Oh, dude. I didn't tell you this. Okay, I got to tell you this now. It's a story. This is a story for the internet. They will love it. I might actually go back, download the clip of this, and clip it out and make a TikTok out of it because it's that funny. So, Donald remembers this. Donald used to be my neighbor, quite literally. He used to literally be my next door neighbor. He's not anymore. He's he lives across the parking lot now. But, and this is why this will make you laugh. Somebody broke into my Jeep one night. And apparently, in my old age, the things that I left in my Jeep weren't worth stealing, including the Jeep itself, which had the key in the ignition. Now, it's a 2016, but it's a stick shift. So, one, they weren't stealing that. This would tell you how dumb they are. I had a blank checkbook in the car they didn't steal.
But they're dumb?
Yeah. Like, kids don't know. Okay, you want to steal something that guarantees you're going to get money out of somebody right now? A checkbook is way easier to go and get stuff done with. Like, go write a check to anywhere you want to write that'll cash the check for you, and you're done. You're good. You're going to get that money, and yes, I might get it back, and they might do something to find you in the long run, but realistically, a checkbook's like, it's a blank check. Go have fun. Go. But here's the comedy behind it all.
Blank check is just a saying.
Yeah, and a blank check
it's just an idiom.
It's just a movie now.
It's just a movie.
Blank Check was a great movie. Go watch that for those of you watching this right now. You'll enjoy yourself. But it's a blank check. I mean, you could have stolen this, but because the technology is not a credit card, they didn't take the bait. Like, I'm still, and when I say, like, they had literally, like, pulled stuff out of my glove box, pulled stuff out of my center console, I mean, nothing was gone. I literally went through it all. I was like, and when I saw the check, because I was like, I knew I had a checkbook, and then I saw that, I was like, what were they looking for? Like,
maybe they thought it was their truck. Like, they're like, oh, where's my, you know?
You could not miss
my Jeep stands out.
Not only that, you wouldn't be able to mistake dog hair, that much dog hair, for any other Jeep.
Jeep. At that point in time, I was still dating that girl, so I actually did have it relatively clean most of the time.
You still had a white interior when it was supposed to be black.
The back seat was white. The front seat was actually still clean. Like I said, I whenever I had somebody was dating, when I date somebody, I clean it out. But all that being said, though, like, I mean, you could have stolen the vehicle.
Only person I know that's disappointed didn't lose something.
I'm not disappointed. I'm disappointed in whoever was robbing.
No, he was. He was disappointed. He's like, man, I couldn't even give it away. Yeah, I wanted a new Jeep, man. That insurance payout would have been gold.
I really didn't. No. To those of you at State Farm listening to this, please sponsor me because I did not want it stolen. This is not a sponsored video post from State Farm.
Take this entire conversation with a grain of salt.
Yeah. This is just, like I said, we go down the rabbit hole and discuss the comedy in our lives. But you know, I say it all the time. It's always a good thing to see when you know that nobody wants what you have, even though what you have is a lot more than what really people should want. I used to joke about my rental insurance and having to up the credit line after having to do some testing for some folks and having like a bunch of graphics cards just kind of sitting around the apartment. Yeah, that was the comical point for me. But we've digressed enough to circle back for this as we roll it. So one of the things, and this is the final topic on the list for the day for us. So you guys use the Surface Go and whatnot, and I think that's a slick move for people that really just need the basics. One of the conversations I've had recently about just looking into, and they're curious on my opinion. So, you know, the lovely team here is getting ready to start figuring it out with us. Is the way our workplace works right now? We're very hybridized, like you said. Teams, Zoom calls, Slack, for whatever purpose people use Slack for still. I know a lot of companies like Slack, but you know, you got all these different platforms for communicating across apps and so on and so forth. Google Suite, you know. Isn't there another one other than G Suite? And well, Mac has like the Mac stuff, and obviously Linux has its stuff. That's one. Okay, we've got a cluster of people. We have one person here who has actually like used a MacBook Pro for a pretty solid period. Thoughts on like MacBook Pros versus like high-end laptops?
Ooh. Mine, the MacBook Pro that I got back in 2015. I still have it, still works. It's a great little laptop because all I do is just browse the internet, look at YouTube, watch videos. That's about it. That's the only reason I have it still. I made the mistake when I got it thinking that I would, because this was, you know, the laptop that I wanted to when I was, you know, I was like, all right, I'm going to go to college. You know, everyone has, all I hear is, oh, yeah, let's get MacBooks. Everyone gets MacBooks. And I forgot that basically every engineering program known to man does not support Mac OS X. So it was a complete waste of money for me in that regard. But I still have it. I still use it daily. If I'm not doing anything on my phone.
And
but go ahead, Brad.
They're beautiful computers. Don't get me wrong. I love love their design outside of some of their thermal solutions. But yeah, like that's what I was getting ready to say. I mean, I guess what I was getting at though is the conversation because I'm kind of curious your opinion too, Jesse. Like, what is the percentage of folks that you run across that run? I mean, the biggest purpose I ever know of for Macs is coding. Like if you go to like an IT dungeon, as I like to call it, where all the IT gurus are, they're all running Mac OS and they're doing code and encoding things and so on and so forth. But have you seen anybody in your runarounds that runs on Mac OS or runs Mac around? Or
No, I mean everything's Windows based. I mean, we were looking at the I'm trying to think the name of it. Something 6, like the Panasonic, whatever, but it runs off of Chrome, and I couldn't use it for interface with needed the Windows operating system. So it kind of, you know, pigeonholes us and what we can do. So like I said, that's we used to use G Suite, and then, you know, it was great for a startup. It was a great, very good value for us. They have amazing single sign-on options with almost any kind of web-based platform you want. But the problem was all my clients did everything in Excel or Word. And the moment you put it in G Drive, it converts it to Sheets or a doc platform, and I lose all my formatting. And it was like frustrating that I would put it there to try to share stuff, and then all the formatting that was in there was gone. And maybe there's a way to preserve that, and I'm just not smart enough to figure that out. But for us, it was it was just a big enough frustration that, I know Excel very well. I know Word very well. I put a lot of effort and make sure that all my formatting, everything was great. And it would piss me off that this program would get rid of it. So, I mean, everything comes down to what you're used to. I mean, I know my brother, he was a pilot, and he couldn't use Mac for some of his stuff. He had to create a virtual Windows platform for him to use his. So that's how he got the value out of his Mac. But for us, I mean, we're, like I said, we're pigeonholed, got to use Windows, and it just makes things easier. Kind of go back to the idea of one platform, but
It's
yeah, I don't know
weird.
if I answered your question.
Oh, you did. It's weird because as consumers and people that look for the best price and value, the conversation and where the conversation goes and cracks me up is you want competition for that, but you want it all on the same platform, which is almost like you don't want competition. You want all the money dumped into one development platform. But if you don't have competition, the platform doesn't do any R&D. I look back to it so did you have to do any? All right, this is a polling the people on screen question. So, did all of you have to go through a typing class in high school or middle school?
Yes.
All right. What did you use for your typing class? Jesse
Windows.
first.
Sorry.
Oh, I think we were pre-Word. I remember mine was something where
Was it on
when
a
we
Was it on a
started,
computer though?
it was on a computer, but I don't remember the actual platform. When we practice, it would be something where it would have the keyboard in front of you. You had to type the letters, it would glow.
Yeah.
I don't know. You went to
You
a
were working
fancy
in
school. I don't know.
DOS. Working in DOS,
Yeah.
basically. Chris, you were Windows based, so you probably Word, right?
We had it was some sort of a game.
Mhm.
It wasn't Windows. Sorry, it wasn't Word, but it was like an actual like game that would give you a score.
On how many things you type per day, per minute, and so on and so forth.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. We had Microsoft Word, and Word back then had a built-in uh, words per minute calculator. It still does if you actually check it. If you actually look through Microsoft Word, hit the search bar, say words per minute or typing, something like that. It'll take. There's an actual like calculator that will sit there and say how many words you're typing per minute as you go. It'll give you a WPM logger there. It was one of the kind of crucial functions in my high school that required it, to be able to do because they wanted us. Of course, like I said, so age wise, I kind of fall between you, Jesse, and Chris and Donald. They're kind of like right behind me, and so we're all kind of right there. But yeah, Word was the thing, dude. Like that was a struggle back then. I brought that into play to think about this was because, like you said, I mean, physically getting into schools, and developing software stacks. I mean, I feel like that's how Microsoft has made such a return on investment. That's where they said, all right, we're going to go give free Office licenses to every student available. If you have a .edu account or you can prove you're a high school or whatever student, yeah, we're going to give you, which by the way, that's the other funny thing now too. Microsoft gives out the kids at the schools these days get .edu email addresses. And in middle and high school, they have an email address that has that stuff in it that's connected to Outlook so that they can get to all their stuff. And if they use, and most, even because you can even get Office on Chromebooks, which isn't an operating system. Chrome OS is just a skin of a UI that takes you to the internet. But they have that, and also I realized I had to point this out. The reason that you can get a Chromebook with 16 gigs of RAM. Have you ever opened a bunch of Chrome tabs? Yeah. Chrome loves RAM. That's why you can get away with 16 gigs of RAM on a Chromebook, and people will pay $800 for it so they can have a few more Chrome tabs open. But the point of it is like if you get into those school systems and you're doing that, yeah, it's marketing 101 for lack of a better word.
That's with any company that supplies or supports education program similar to even with CAD programs.
Yeah.
You know,
Autodesk
you'll
was the
have
same way.
Autodesk allowing schools to, at a very, very reduced cost, allow their students to use their software and basically get them hooked at a young age to say, hey, you know, I know how to use this software. I will now use this software for the rest of my life because I don't feel like learning anything else.
Well, I would say Word enabled my education. I don't think I would have gotten through grad school without hitting F7. So it's definitely something you get hooked on because my
And
handwriting,
autocorrect.
my handwriting went to crap and I can't spell. So it's definitely allowed me to look a lot more intelligent than I am.
Mine still sucks. That's why I have Donald. I just send something to him and say proofread it. Actually, that's what Charlie's for, Donald. Charlie is the grammar Nazi. He's the guy where if you need something, if you need like, I don't know, and I feel like every organization has that. You have to have somebody that is your proofreader, for lack of a better word, because if you got to type a big email to somebody way up the stack, you know, somebody important out there, you want them to, you want to look professional. I'll send emails back and forth between the team that might make no sense and completely lacks periods. And just because I'm typing it on the computer and I'm not typing it on my phone, where it automatically adds a period after a second space bar. I mean,
I hate that feature.
Mm.
I can't do the double, you know, the double space bar and there's a period. It's never been my thing. I like knowing when I end my sentence. Period.
I think you mean the exclamation point.
Question mark? Semicolon.
But
Semicolon, right parentheses.
in the hybrid workflow that we have, one of the things that was brought up as a point for discussion was we keep seeing where people want to use weaker and weaker spec machines, mainly because the weaker spec machines now are 10 times more powerful than the high power machines 5 years ago, right? And so the conversation that we've had is like, if you had a discrete GPU, for lack of a better word, which is a DGPU, that can offload things like graphics processing and graphics encoding for like Teams meetings. How much performance can you pick up doing that between a machine that's just got an iGPU and a machine that's got the DGPU? Can you, if you're needing to up the stack from an i5 to an i7, can you actually save some money instead by going from, because an i5 to an i7 is a couple $100 usually, maybe 2 or 3, especially when you consider all the other stuff that they end up giving you when you make that change up from an OEM perspective. But can you get away with staying at that i5 and throwing in a $75 discrete graphics card on the board? So that's one of the tests that we're getting ready to kind of start having conversations about looking at, because it makes sense from a perspective for us to kind of know. The recommendations that Chris and I have made to people on machine purchases and the recommendations and testings that we're all kind of working on together as a group, it's important that people understand there are products out there that are great, but at the same time, you have to be looking at things from, especially when you're going to a corporate purchase or when you're going to a small business purchase. You don't want to, Jesse, I'm sure you would love to have a $9,000 laptop for yourself and everybody on your team, but that doesn't make financial sense. When it comes to going out and bidding work and doing that kind of stuff, the overhead has to be as minimalistic as possible.
Yeah, guys. Yeah, guys obviously want something that, isn't flimsy, won't fall apart on you. Processing speed is important largely just because of, how long it takes. I'm trying to think of like the worst decision we ever made is we got one of the like $125 tablet, window-based tablet PC. And I kind of laughed that I was stupid enough to make that move. And I'm the one that sets up all these machines for my guys when they come into training. And I instantly realized I made a mistake when, when you buy a new computer, you have to do all the updates. Normally it takes about maybe 2, 3 hours. Yeah, it took over 18 hours to download and install updates for Windows. And I was like, ooh, ironically, once I got past that, it worked. But it worked. It was a great temporary solution. I've been able to do some training on these things, but in hindsight, once once we got beyond our basic level commissioning that we were doing, a lot of the equipment we we're working on, it was useless. Once we got into having to do with parameters and things like that, it was like, well, time to move on. And once we did that, I all but got hugs from my team.
So
So you can make mistakes and go cheap. So I think the number one thing to remind people is, value is not the lowest dollar, right? And in construction and stuff like that, I think there's a lot of EPCs and owners and stuff like that that have learned that if you go at the lowest bidder, it ends up costing you more. So you really got to look at value, and that's where hopefully we're people like myself who aren't real geeky and techie as much as you guys are. I'm going to a guy like Chris and say, man, just shoot me straight, and hopefully he's a honest guy and gonna shoot me straight, and I'm gonna get my values worth. But yeah, it's really easy to spend a lot of money on something and then be like, oh, that was a waste, especially when you think about scalability. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to go out. And I mean, for me, it's like, look at my personal finances. Yeah, if I go out and buy myself a, $1,200 computer, it's not that big of a deal. But now, times that by 22, and my work, I'm dealing with terms on, net 90. So I got to do all this work for 90, pay my guys for travel, the equipment, you name it all. And I just invested all this money in equipment that's going to take me 90 days to get paid. Yeah, it's going to be a little hard to sit there and say, yeah, everyone's going to get a $1,200 laptop. So those are the things that companies got to look at when they're making decisions, because cash is king. Everyone only has a finite amount, and so um, you're sitting there. Why would anyone buy something last year amount? Well, sometimes that's all you need to squeak through. A lot of times people sit there and say, hey, there's going to be a moment where I'm going to be able to upgrade in a year and a half, because the way my guys treat my stuff, there's no way that I'm not going to be buying a couple of new ones. And so, if I got a technician I don't like, he'll get the older stuff. But for the most part, everyone's going to sit there and look at what they're doing, and the dollars and cents sometimes drives decisions. And I'm one of those people that we look at our core values and stuff like that, and I always want to make sure my guys have what they need to do the job that we're asking them to do. I always say it shouldn't be a carny game working for RCI. So you guys all think about going to the carnival. Most of the games are rigged, really difficult to win a prize. But if you come to work and you've got expectations, it should be very easy and attainable for your people to do that. And I think a lot of people sometimes set their people up for failure by getting the wrong equipment. And I think it's good to have someone like myself who is not necessarily the tech savvy guy, to have relationship with folks like yourselves that you guys can set me straight. But I think the best thing you can do is learn from mistakes, because there's many times you won't believe it until you've done it to yourself. So
Yeah.
I can tell you I've gone out, got the cheapest, and it burnt us. So, and then that always ends up costing you more. I've got I think 18 of these things, and but then again, you always find a ability to use them. When our surfaces didn't come in, I need to get through some training and show some people web apps. It was perfect. It ran all the web-based apps that I needed to, just enough to get through what I needed. So, it really comes down to what people need to do. I'm just sitting here trying to think of where someone in the field needs all that processing speed that you're talking about, because I'm even thinking about what you're doing. Although I have to admit, some of the drawing packages that these engineers are sending out now, it takes forever for you to go from page to page just to load a PDF. But yeah, I guess I could say that value is definitely a word a lot of people need to look up. It doesn't mean cheap.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'll come to the final question of the night, and I'll start it off with Donald so he can kind of preface why I'm going this way, because he's gonna love this comment. Um, One of the few things that I think Chris and Donald and myself have gotten to play around with a lot more recently, especially you and me, Donald, more recently, is the VR and AR experience. All right, and so one, like I said, Donald's been messing around with it for me and doing a lot of testing and setup and prep for being able to get that out to guys. Um, where do you, in the conversation that we had earlier, we were talking about camera systems and so on and so forth, but where do you see that in the industry and the niche and things that you work in? Is that something that will change or define, the next generation of movers and shakers, for lack of a better word, or um, is it something where we're going to be looking at, you know, VR kind of dying, and maybe we go back to that Surface Pro method where you got, or the Surface Go method, whatever, where you got the tablet and you're holding it up, and it's kind of giving you the AR experience, where you're looking at it through the camera on the machine and it sees something and it's giving you some data back that way. Um, what are your thoughts on that field? And the reason I say that is from a gaming perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there that love gaming and VR and so on and so forth. There always are going to be those kind of people. But I think that there's a missed opportunity in a lot of workplaces for VR and XR applications. And the reason I think that is because there is so much going on that in that space that it really could provide a whole nother market for us to kind of really be able to go out and work and use. So Donald, kind of give an idea, give your perspective on it, and then Jesse kind of tag in and just say, where do you think it's going? Is it something you guys are going to be using? That kind of thing.
Right now, I would say with the people that I've worked with, trying to explain the VR setup and how it can be useful in their line of work. See it at this point more as a gimmick than something useful. Um, and that's really I at this point I would pretty much chalk it almost as a generational uh, perspective difference. Younger people, the people that are using it now, which would be our age right now. So you have 25 to 40 that can actually really understand the technology fairly well and can see the potential, will build it into a better product for future years. Right now, we're in the very early stages of VR. I'd even still say that now. I believe there will be, and this is something that really should be done. There needs to be more customization and interaction between real world situations and a VR environment. It's nice to have a 3D image of an area, and that you'd be able to like travel through it and whatnot and be able to look around. But the guys now, if you can't turn that valve or, actually like move this lever or something like that, they don't really care. They want it to essentially be a video game. They want to be able to have those interactions built in. And that's why that's why I think like the technology right now, it's going towards that direction. But we're still very early on in its adoption and utilization. In terms of augmented reality, I'd say it's getting pretty. I'd say augmented reality is going to be more useful in the next couple of years than VR will be. Personally, from what I've seen of both sides, or from instances of viewing both technologies in person, augmented realities, you know, will probably help replace labels one day, maybe, probably not, but it could at least give you more information about the system if you do look at a valve, if you do look at a label. While VR, I would say it would be more augmented is better on site. VR, of course, better for training.
I completely agree.
I was gonna say I agree with that concept, and then yeah.
Well, I was going to say, man, that you're reading my mind. Brad, you saved the last question, or the best question for last, because this is one I actually geek about. I don't know if everyone else on here is as familiar with Charlie Dunn as Brad is, but he's a good friend of ours, and he works for DPR, and he invited me out to a little demonstration, little kickoff thing they had at DPR, and one of their, I guess, safety / trainers was showcasing their augmented reality for their rigging team. And I'm up on a mezzanine. It's got guardrails and the standard handrails and everything else, but they got the fans going. Put on the virtual reality goggles, and it was like, holy cow! I know that I'm not walking an I-beam, but it was crazy. I got the butterflies in my stomach, and I actually had one of my assistants with me, and he's deathly afraid of heights. And we had a glass elevator in Vegas one time he wouldn't go on just because he's that afraid of heights. So he put it on. He's like, "Ooh, can't do that." And so it is crazy. I think augmented reality or virtual reality for training is awesome, because I sit there and think that right now we are not getting a workforce that exists that knows how to do what needs to be done. And I think virtual reality and augmented reality are the only way that we're going to start getting people to be able to do real field work, because we've lost that skill set. You ask people right now, how many people are coming out of high school expecting to work in the field and use their hands? I find it amazing how many people don't even know how to change a tire on a vehicle. It's crazy. So to think that now I'm going to take that work. I had a guy that was a mechanic on tanks for the Army not know how to change a tire on a car, and it blew my mind. So I'll just tell you that there are a lot of issues we're going to have with getting people out in the field to do work. So I think in a training environment, VR, yeah, we had talked about early adopters are probably pay the biggest price, but those who do will probably reap the biggest benefits. But then when we look at, say, augmented reality, I mean, just imagine if on your screen, you could teach your parents how to do stuff because you're pointing to their screen what they need to hit or whatever. I think tech support, or you're one of my what I look at what my team does that makes them awesome is I've got highly trained individuals with the right tools and equipment and PPE that I can deploy anywhere that they're needed. Now, I don't think any one site could actually afford them just to stay there, but they kind of can pay a higher price for a short term. My guy comes in, does stuff. And I think you're going to start seeing a lot of people doing support on whether it's solar systems, energy storage units, or even power plants, robotics inside assembly plants. You're going to have a few guys that really know what they're doing that will have the ability through augmented reality to get other folks that'll be like maybe using their tablet and they're pointing stuff to help them direct labor in the field and get them up to speed. So I think that's the future, and hopefully I can grow my little tyke business to a place where I can be someone that can afford that kind of stuff. Definitely something I geek about. I think back to the time, everything that I did with Synchro and VDC when we were at McGuire Major Projects there, Brad, I can't wait till they finally implement that with constructing solar sites. I don't know if you guys have seen how they're doing these, but I mean, you're getting basically day laborers, and you're trying to get them to assemble these racking arrays and everything else. and you're mobilizing a workforce. Some of them speak different languages, and I think being able to show a video will get them on the same direction. Because it's so modular for what we're doing, I think that would be a great way to quickly train your workforce, because once you've done it a couple of times, you're good. But there's a few hazards here or there that obviously you want to be mindful of. And in a virtual reality world, you can create that hazard and try to get them more aware, and it without actually being in real danger, right? So that's an area where I think virtual reality is. It's definitely the training and development side. Other than that, I mean, I think there's algorithms now that, clash detection and stuff like that. If you do a great scan, that someone can still be an armchair engineer with, the right data given to them. But training a workforce is important. But I think augmented reality is definitely the future, especially when it comes to servicing equipment, maintenance, and stuff like that. You're going to have a few guys with just enough training to get out in the field, and you're going to have a smaller group of people that have that true knowledge that will be able to service stuff remotely.
I 100% agree with that statement. I tend to think that and forget and think, but I would dare say that there's a lot that is available to make some changes, and I think a lot of the hardware. So the big thing is going to be. I mean, I know we've all kind of seen and heard there's new headsets coming out yearly or every other year now, just like other hardware that comes out. But I think the big thing is going to be the device. For early adopters are paying the price, but they're getting the skills. And I think we're still probably 3 to 5 years from commercialized operations of those kind of things. But I would say, being 3 to 5 years from there, if you're not investing right now and not you don't have to be an early adopter at this point, because it's not an early adopter space anymore. Early adoption was 3 to 5 years ago, and we're in that building slope, and it's taking momentum. Like I said, I truly think that VR, AR, XR, whatever you want to call the different platforms and so on and so forth, whether it be the HoloLens or a Quest 2 headset or anything like that, I truly think that it's going to be, like I said, 3 to 5 years from now, when folks who have been developing hard on this platform right now are able to, very quickly put a product out and it be a very useful tool for, like you said, for training and teaching and putting people in the environment, like you said, where they're in a hazardous environment, but they're safe, you know? So I definitely agree with the thoughts and the processes behind it. We've been going for a hot minute, guys. I appreciate the time, Jesse. Thank you for coming on and giving us your time. We might have to have a conversation about having you back at some point in the future, especially if we can maybe make some of the connections and contacts to discuss some things more about VR and XR with some folks, or maybe have a panel discussion one day. The expectation that I have in the near future for the channel is that we're going to start having more and more content pushed out than just monthly, and even when we were doing it bi-monthly. Some of it will be, just one or two of us going over our reviews and some spreadsheets and some bar graphs and all that stuff showing performance differences in different applications. But we still want to keep the content focused to where we also try to bring in folks like you, Jesse, that are out there that are the end user. Because ultimately, we can talk about people that want to go out and are super hardware focused, but like I said, the podcast is not this podcast. Don't call me for IT support. It's about the guys that are the end user. I consider myself an end user. I also have to fix people's computers from time to time, because I do. And if you're not that person that does that in your family, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, most people almost. I would bet Chris and Donald, between the three of us, if somebody in the family broke something on a computer, the first person they would be calling is us in the family.
I just don't answer them anymore.
Yeah. I try not to do that. I mean, I do appreciate when they take me out to dinner every now and then, right? There's perks for it, but It's not the same.
You're better off than I am.
It's not quite the same. But yeah, I mean, it's this podcast is for people that are the everyday end user that want to know what's going to be unique, what's coming based on announcements, what's every now and then we'll go down the rumor mill path and see what's really happening, but realistically we try to focus on the conversational pieces. What's real, what's materialized already. But I say all that to say this: it's been a pleasure talking with you, Jesse. Thank you for coming on. At this point in time, we got no questions tonight, but that's probably because of my screw ups with the setting up of the stream. Chris, you're going to do it next time, again. But I'm Brad Medlin. He's Chris. He's Donald. It's Jesse. Thank you guys for coming and checking us out, and feel free to reach out.